Hello, my name is Guy Thomas, and as the Dan Europe Director of Safety Programs and Initiatives, I welcome you to the second presentation on Dan's HIRA, or Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment Program. If you haven't seen the introductory presentation on HIRA yet, then I recommend you to start with that presentation first, so you have a clear understanding about what HIRA is and what it can do for you as a diving professional. Today I will be guiding you through a presentation about an important part of risk mitigation, standard operational procedures. This presentation will take about 25 minutes, and at the end of the presentation I will give you some information on where to find written information about the subject. But for now, sit back, relax and enjoy the presentation. Let's take a look at what standard operation procedures actually are and how they relate to diving safety and to your job as a dive professional, dive center owner or manager. Which are the subjects we will handle during this presentation? At the end of this presentation, you will know what standard operational procedures are and why you need them. You will have a clear idea where to start and which typical tasks require SOPs. I will also explain how to prepare them and who develops and implements these procedures. Before we will actually look into SOPs, let us stop for a brief moment and look at emergency planning. Emergency planning is, in a few words, all kinds of planning one should do to be prepared in case of emergency, or steps that need to be done to avoid an emergency from happening in the first place. Clear procedures will help us in being prepared, and we can differentiate between two kinds of procedures. The first one, the real standard operation procedures, which are written documents which explain how to organize or do specific tasks with the aim of creating a standardized and streamlined process. Here we mitigate the risk and try to avoid an accident from happening. The second type of procedures are emergency action plans, or EAPs. Also, these are written documents, but they explain how to act or react in case of an emergency. Here we mitigate the damage of potential events that could endanger people or an organization's ability to function safely. So there is a substantial difference between these two kinds of procedures. Here are some examples to show the difference between SOPs and EAPs. An SOP could address how to safely enter the water. These procedures would need to take into account your local dive operation and the possible risks which are present. Such a procedure could, for example, require to shut down the boat's propeller or engine before any divers enter the water. Another example is head count procedures, or how do you check all divers are back ashore or on board to avoid divers getting lost without anybody noticing it? As always, how to organize and mitigate this risk will depend from your local situation. Examples of EAPs, on the contrary, are how to act in case of a propeller injury, or to link it to the example of SOPs I mentioned earlier, what your actions would be in case an accident happened, even if standard operation procedures were respected, or if for whatever reasons they were not respected. So what would you do in that case? As a second example of EAPs, and also linked to the second example of the SOPs I spoke about a minute ago, a lost diver plan. One of your divers or buddy teams did not show up at the agreed or within the expected time limit. What are the actions you need to take to increase chances of finding the missing diver or divers again? Now that we made a clear difference between SOPs and EAPs, let's see why we need procedures. Imagine you work in a dive center, school or club with 2 staff members, or you are an independent instructor and work with dive master or assistants, and you have 2 buddy teams that will join you on a boat dive. One staff member or assistant of yours tells the client he should get fully dressed before he enters the dive boat. Another staff member tells to the same or another client that he should get his dive bag with all his gear inside the boat first and then should get dressed on the boat. This would create confusion. Two staff members telling contradictory things to clients. What does the client need to do now? It would even be possible that one of these two suggestions impose a risk that could be avoided. Maybe there isn't enough space on the boat, or even moderate waves, who might always be present at the dive location, might pose a risk in a client falling and hurting himself while getting dressed. Or getting fully dressed for a longer time might lead to hyperthermia in warm destination. Here you need one procedure that allows tasks to be performed in a consistent manner, taking into account the local situation and possible risk connected to these specific tasks. And no, these procedures are not told to staff but written down. Not only to make sure staff can always check how to perform tasks, as we all forget sometimes, but also to train new staff members. Imagine you have one or more staff members and you can hand them over a set of clear guidelines and procedures that would help them not only in doing their job the way you want it to be done, but also to do this in a safe way. Many tasks can be done in a dive center. Are you sure you can tell them all by voice, not forgetting anything, and then hoping these new staff members to remember all you said? What would make you more comfortable and what would make them more comfortable? But it isn't about being comfortable. It's about being able to work in a safe way and protect clients, staff, your facilities, assets, and even the environment. Well thought of and implemented procedures will also reduce your liability risk. Imagine a diver getting hit by a propeller when entering the water. This diver probably will be severely injured. Now he claims you are responsible for the accident, as you didn't do all that was needed to avoid such accident. There will be an investigation. And how will you prove you have been using procedures or did all that was needed to avoid the accidents? Or even, how would you prove your staff or, in certain occasions, clients knew what to do? Having a set of procedures surely will reduce the exposure of your business to punitive actions and avoid you to having to pay a liability claim. But what is the biggest advantage? Exactly, avoiding accidents and make your dive operations safer. Sounds all logical, but making SOPs isn't a piece of cake and will be a time-consuming job. It will give you lots of benefits and even save time on the long run. But where should we start? The first thing to determine is the scope of operations. A dive center will have a series of activities and services. Activities can be of administrative or organizational nature, can include giving information to clients, and they can be diving related or non-diving related. Services can include rental, cylinder filling, maintenance, guided dives, courses, try dives, sales, accommodation, catering, boat charters, or other. The scope of operation is specific to your dive operation, and you will need to list all what you do or offer to your clients. Then you need an assessment. You can do this by dividing your operation into areas and consequently determine which tasks are done and needed in a specific area of your business, such as, for example, the compressor room. And once you know the task to be done, you need to determine how this job can be done in the safest way. What you need to do the job, and this in terms of equipment, training or staff. Who can do the tasks? Is training or certification required? And finally, you should foresee what to do if there is a problem. To use the compressor room as example, one of the tasks would be filling cylinders, which is probably the main task in the compressor room. So how you want a cylinder to be filled? Cylinders immersed in water, secured against falling. What about the speed of filling from air banks or maximum filling pressure? And checking air quality. Well, if you want air quality to be checked, you need an analyzer. So must foresee in having one, and whoever fills the cylinder should know how the analyzer works. And the person filling the cylinder doesn't need to undergo specific training to do this operation. Is a specific certification needed? What if the compressor breaks? Is there an alternative or backup? Get this all written down in a document, short but clear. Most of these things might be in your head already. Once you've written SOPs, the job isn't over yet. You or somebody else will need to evaluate them to make sure they are not in conflict with other existing procedures. Should you write in one procedure that each diver needs an SMB before he enters the water, you can't have another SOP saying that the use of an SMB is only recommended. You also want to make sure that they are in accordance with local regulations and safety standards. Then, you also need to evaluate if checklists or logs are needed. They are helpful for briefings, rental purposes, compressor filling, maintenance, or daily checks. You will also need to use your own experience or those of others who are specialized and experienced in performing some of the required tasks. And last but not least, remember that an SOP needs to be re-evaluated periodically, as they will change over time. To make your life easier, it is therefore recommended to date SOPs, so you always know when a document was updated last time. Now that you have an SOP, you are not there yet. These procedures need to be implemented in order to be effective. Make sure your staff is informed, and this includes providing orientation to them and making the needed documents and training available to those who are required to perform the tasks. It's highly recommended to have all your staff members sign for acknowledgement and to confirm they will respect the SOP. What you want is to be sure your staff knows what to do without improvisation. And in case there is any discussion, you will have a signed document so they can't say they did not know or were not aware of any SOP. Of course, you want your staff or assistants to respect procedures. This means that should they not respect them, you need to take corrective actions. Should they not respect them because they didn't understand them or are not able to perform required tasks, then you can provide learning opportunities. By staff respecting procedures and you taking corrective actions if needed, you also reduce legal consequences. Just imagine a staff member with a hearing loss after years of operating a compressor while not using personal protection materials. If he claims you knew he wasn't using them, but didn't oblige him to use them, you will find yourself in a difficult situation should this be taken to court. Enough said about how to get started. Let us now look at typical tasks that require SOPs. These tasks are pre-dive safety briefings, head count procedures, disinfection procedures, administrative procedures, maintenance procedures, lost diver prevention plans, entry and exit procedures, post-dive safety briefings. Are there any other? Surely there are. They will depend from your local reality and activities and services offered. I mentioned local reality a few times now. Indeed, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Tasks will need to be performed according to your local situation, and what makes sense for one dive center might even be unsafe for another. This means that compiling SOPs is a time-consuming job. There are no shortcuts when it comes to safety. Remember to inform new staff, or all staff, that are required to do new tasks about procedures. And risk assessments are needed if you want your SOP to be solid, effective, and reliable. Does an SOP guarantee an accident will not happen? No, but it will reduce the possibility of an accident happening. The preparation of an SOP isn't an easy thing to do. It surely will help you to keep it simple and clear. Let's summarize what we've seen so far. We start by identifying an area of interest, let's say that compressor room again. Now you will need to perform a risk assessment to identify any possible risk present in that area. This will include hearing loss, fire, explosion, oil spills, electrical failure, and others. Now you should determine which tasks are to be done in that specific area. And maybe you will need to assess the risk again based on the task. Take for example maintenance. How you want it to be done? Well, surely you will need to filter and oil to get the task done. But what about the staff? Are they trained for it? And do they have the needed tools? This needs to be taken into account. Next, try to see what could be a possible problem. Let's say you could run out of filters. Do you have an alternative? This brings us to the evaluation of the standard operation procedure. And you want to consider the use of checklists and logs. These might also resolve the problem of falling without a filter. Or your SOP during evaluation might be updated in a way that every time your staff member changes a filter, a new one is ordered, or something similar. Once you are happy with all of this, it brings us to the implementation and acknowledgement from your staff, as described earlier. And don't forget those corrective actions. Corrective actions might also be needed for the procedure itself, if it shows that something is wrong with it or not complete. Remember that the risk assessment is an ongoing action. Okay, but who needs to do all of this? Is this a one-man job? It could be a one-man job, but mostly it is not. Let's take a look at the role players. Starting with the leadership. The management might not be the ones who actually write the procedure, but they need to lead by example with commitment, interest and intent to increase safety and have a procedure in place in the first place. Then we have the compiler, which should be an experienced person or an external consultant and should base himself on industry examples and standards. The management will need to review and adjust the procedure if needed. After that comes the implementation officer, which will need to support the management to be able to perform his tasks, which requires credibility, authority and attention to detail. Of course, staff members are more likely to respect an experienced person, and if the management supports him, staff will not be able to say they are not required to listen to him. But implementation also might require additional training, and also here the support of the management is needed. If training is required, you need persons that can provide this. You might find them amongst your staff members, or might seek these services elsewhere. You can, for example, think about fire safety officers, of staff that is trained on how to act in case of a fire, or how to extinguish starting fires. Although it is possible that you have such an instructor in your staff, mostly this is not the case, and you might need to hire a fire safety instructor, or get some of your staff members trained as a DAN fire safety instructor should this DAN course be available in your region. The last role player is the staff itself. They need to take it seriously, understand the importance and benefits, and be a part of the review process, not only to feel involved, but also because they can give you valid feedback, and they need to participate in all of this with the management acknowledging their efforts. Let's see where we stand using a practical example. I'll use the example of a long diver prevention procedure, and remember that I can't give you a ready-to-use procedure, but just want you to start getting into the process of risk assessment and get you thinking about possible procedures. Ask yourself, in your personal situation reality, how would you want things to be done? Whatever the situation you are in, you always need something that makes it possible for you to make sure all divers in the water are back, and you don't leave the dive site with divers left behind. You also want to tell divers what to do if they lose their buddy or a dive guide during the dive, and you want the guides to react in an appropriate manner as well. At the surface, you want the diver to be visible from a distance, and might require divers to carry a personal delayed surfer marker buoy or DSMB. You might also need to use binoculars. So we require clients to carry DSMBs. We can ask from our staff to also additionally carry a rescue streamer, which is the long floating and orange-colored rescue device you see on the picture on the screen. This device makes it possible to be easily visible from a SAR helicopter or plane from a bigger distance. At this point, I also can recommend you to look at our Lost Diver Prevention campaign. You can find this campaign published at the safety pages of our website. So you establish a rule that a group is maximum composed of 1 guide and 4 divers, and that in case a diver gets separated from his group or his buddy, he will look around for a minute, try to look for bubbles, and of course this will depend on the visibility, and will get to the surface respecting the safe ascent speed, and then he will wait at the surface while he deploys his DSMB. In this case, we need enough DSMBs and rescue streamers for our staff, and make sure they are trained in its use. And we also realize we need to tell our clients in advance that they need to bring a DSMB. Furthermore, we need a briefing explaining the procedures to be taken in case they get separated, and you need to have a system that your staff can use to make sure all divers are back. You might also require a staff member on the boat or shore to check the surface for divers returning at the surface. So material-wise, we already have a good idea what we might need. Of course, you also need to evaluate if you have enough staff members or assistants. Let's now think about a possible problem. What about the client that shows up without a DSMB? What to do next? Send him back home? Or organize yourself so that you have extra DSMBs for sale, rent, or even to give them to use during the dive? Does it make sense? Now let's see if we can already evaluate this partial procedure. We need to make sure divers are back, and we need to inform clients of the safety rules. So we could benefit from a dive roster and a checklist, or a pre- and post-dive safety briefing that needs to include the Lost Diver Prevention procedure. Here we already realize that the pre-dive briefing needs to take this specific requirement into account, and that there should be no conflict between the lost diver and the pre-dive briefing procedure. I repeat, this example is just for you to understand the reasoning and principles. The real lost diver prevention plan will need to be completely personalized for your local situation. Don't just copy and paste from documents you'll find online. So now it's up to you. Here are a few SOPs you might want to consider: lost diver prevention, air contamination prevention, decompression sickness prevention, pre-dive safety briefing, boat safety briefing, post-dive briefings, and headcount procedures using a checklist. These last 3 are, by the way, a prerequisite for your higher level 1 certification, so you might want to start with these first. And this brings us to the end of our presentation and time together. You now know what SOPs are and why they are important. You also know where to start and have a good idea of the typical tasks that require procedures, and understand how to prepare a standard operation procedure, who develops and who implements them. Now it's up to you to get started and make sure that your standard operation procedures increase diving safety in your own dive operation. And remember, your clients and staff will benefit from this and expect a certain level of professionality that you can give them, also thanks to your implemented standard operation procedures. Thanks for watching this presentation, and I hope this basic understanding of what SOPs are and can do for you will help you increasing risk awareness and diving safety in your dive operation or during your activity as a diving professional. You can find more information about this subject in the Alert Diver at www.alertdiver.eu or at the safety section of our website, daneurope.org. Should you have any questions about HIRA or about this presentation, you can always email us at hira@daneurope.org. We are here to help you in increasing dive safety for yourself and for your clients. The next presentation in this HIRA series will deal with another important component of risk assessment and risk awareness, the Emergency Action Plan. I hope to welcome you again at that presentation. For now, stay tuned and be safe.